Over the next 365 days, me and 4 other artists have been challenged with designing our own fantasy realms from the ground up. So we're going to be taking it episode by episode, developing a magic system, characters, notable landmarks, and anything else that will need to transfer us into this new magical world. Let's create some chaos! Disclaimer, this is the first draft of the world. Anything in these videos are subject to hopefully only minor changes over the course of the series. In our first episode today, we'll be taking a look at the overall map that I designed for this challenge and diving deeper into one of the 3 mainlands that this world consists of. So without further ado, I present to you the land of Connexa, a rich, vast world with magic around every turn. The Connexian territory is comprised of 3 main regional lands, with a set of uncharted islands up to the north. Each of the 3 mainlands focuses on producing a different set of goods that aids in a certain part of life and society, aiding the other 2 mainlands with resources and assistance when necessary. Each mainland has their own culture, governing bodies, and unique ways of life, though all of Connexa is overseen by one central ruling family that all other leaders report to. The first one we'll be looking at today is now known only as the Deadlands. Let's jump into it. Woo! The Deadlands are exactly what they sound like. A large area with no notable features. However, it wasn't always like that. Long ago, the Deadlands were just like the other regions in this area, thriving with life and culture. However, a combination of socioeconomic problems and disastrous events turned the once lively region into a desolate wasteland. Now, the Deadlands are sprawled with rocky cliffs and craters, all organic life forms and vegetation being wiped from the surface. The ruins of the cities are the only things that remain standing, but even those have begun to succumb to the effects of time and nature. The Deadlands, previously known as used to be the main hub of artistry and craftwork in Connexa. Potters, weavers, artists, scribes, and people from all creative walks of life would either live or frequently gather to hone and trade their craft, as well as experience a myriad of other artistic mediums. Even people from outside the main regions of Connexa were drawn to and its large art-centric culture. Despite this mainland's immense size, every city and village in the region fell under the rule of one king. Unfortunately, though, the intense focus on artistry and creativity had some downsides. The king of often disregarded any of his duties that weren't art-related, even going as far as neglecting to manage food shipments and military personnel from the other mainlands. This resulted in a failed economy, shortage of resources, and in a technical sense, a military force that was well armed, as almost all weapons in Connexa were forged in thanks to its strong blacksmithing industry, but was otherwise weak and disorganized. These factors made an easy target for outside forces and invading nations, but nothing would have caused as much damage as the Eternal Darkness. The Eternal Darkness was an ancient entity previously thought to only have existed in legends. However, the people of experienced this overwhelming evil firsthand as it swept through their mainland, ruthlessly wiping out everything in its path. As the Eternal Darkness swept through the mainland, hundreds of artists spent their final moments documenting the malignant force. Interestingly, from the few recounts that survived the Eternal Darkness's devastation, not one rendition matches perfectly with another. Some depicted a large, shapeless smoke cloud, while others showed massive physical creatures, or, in some cases, humanoid figures. The only thing that was consistent among all the renditions were glowing red dots that resembled eyes, though the number and placements of these dots varied between accounts. Despite their best efforts, no one is believed to have survived the Eternal Darkness's attack, an event that became known as the Cleansing. Furthermore, it was nigh impossible for anyone to have escaped, as the eternal darkness circled the newly leveled Deadlands, striking at anything on the surface that moved. However, that didn't stop some theories from circulating that proposed survivors of the cleansing escaped to the series of islands north of the Deadlands, but no one has been able to prove that. As time went by, the combination of nature and the eternal darkness's attacks resulted in an uneven landscape with cliffs of varying heights tapering off before picking back up again, and massive craters that were big enough to swallow whole cities. Some so deep that they appear to burrow into the earth, where the faint light from the gray sky is incapable of touching it. When designing this landscape, I knew that I wanted it to be very desaturated and barren, a sign that no one has lived there or even trekked there for many years. I feel like I did strike a nice balance between using color and keeping it dead and gray. If you're a regular to this channel, you know that I love highly saturated colors when I'm working with characters and just pieces overall, and I often go with the more saturated palette so the colors can all pop. This was the exact opposite and therefore a challenge for me, as I had to intentionally work with the more desaturated side, allowing me to practice my value shading. However, I didn't just stick with plain gray at 0 saturation and 0 hue. Instead, I opted to add a little bit of orange and blue hues to give the landscape a little bit of a pop every here and there and make everything feel more natural. Especially in the mountains, where I used a very loose version of photo bashing to create the rocks, taking little swatches from pictures of desert and rocky landscapes and using that to create my own. Overall, I really like how the landscape turned out, especially since landscapes and environments are not my forte, but there are some areas that I would like to work on in my art going forward, and specifically in my environmental drawings. For one, I want to better understand how to texture different materials. For this piece and pretty much all my other environmental pieces, I would often take an airbrush or some kind of noise splatter brush, color pick the mainland, shift it up in hue a bit, and then very loosely just start painting in little puffs every here and there to give the environment some detail to make it look less flat. And I repeated that a couple of times with different hues and levels of saturation, and as a whole it does serve the purpose I was going for, making the whole landscape seem more natural and less flat, as I said. But if you study the piece, the texture doesn't quite match the perspective of the piece. You can see it best in the middle right of the landscape where the mainland meets the sky. Since there's really no shading there to offset that pattern, it looks like as the landscape itself is going further back into the horizon, the texture pattern is only going up to the top of the canvas, which creates a little bit of inconsistency in certain parts of the landscape, which I don't love. And a sense of scale is another aspect of the landscape and backgrounds that I want to improve on. The Deadlands are supposed to be this vast nothingness that goes on seemingly forever with the occasional ruins here and there. And as I was mentioning, I think I nailed the emptiness and deadness, but I don't know if I really nailed the vast element as well as I was imagining. Granted, I was a little pressed for time, so I didn't manage to get in as many runes into this landscape as I would have liked, but the ones I did throw in, the cliffs and the tower, I don't know how well they really aid in that sense. Like, I feel they aren't in the right spots to come across to the viewer as, oh, these seem really small, but they're really huge and just really far in the background. I don't know if I nailed that, and I would really like to get better at that sense of scaling, especially when it's these wide shots of area. I think it might have to do with a lack of detail. I think particularly if I added more cliffs and jagged edges to this piece, then it would have made the background pieces seem further back and therefore bigger from what they are. And the final thing I really want to work on are more atmospheric things, making the whole piece really feel connected and natural. One of these things is making the backgrounds fade more and more into the skyline with the atmospheric perspective, where they get hazier to match the color of the skyline the further you go back. I did try picking a part of the sky and airbrushing the parts that were further back in this landscape after recording was done. And again, it serves a purpose, but it's not the best solution that I like. But that's all I have to say for now. For the first episode of designing my own fantasy world, focusing on the once art-centric portion of Connexa, now known as the Deadlands. And there we have it, our first episode of this new fantasy realm. I'll be honest, I had no idea how to start off this series, both art and story-wise, but I'm very happy with how this video turned out. The art is a little dead, for lack of a better word, but I was also spending a lot of time working on the map itself, so I didn't have much time to do the landscape. But dead is also the point of the Deadlands. And the story I absolutely love, and now that I know how it works, I'm so excited to get into more of this series. We've got more lands to discover, people to see, magic to learn. I'm so excited for what I have in store for this series. But one final thing, make sure to check out the other 4 artists who have participated in this challenge. We are staggering the videos on upload day, so I don't know which ones are out by the time mine comes out, but eventually they will all be on the screen. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is KyngPin, and I'll see you all in the next video. Happy New Year, everyone.